Hi, I am Julie Dalton, the author of The Forest Becomes Her, and this is One Final Twist.
Julie, we're super excited to have you on One Final Twist with us. This novel, I feel like, explores a very powerful intersection of people, place, and the choices that shape us. And it's a very intense blend for me. I say I will because I love that. I think that every reader can walk away with something different from this book. For me, it was an unforgettable blend of fiction, realism, a little economical, eco science, like horror thriller, save the world, and the connection that people have to the environment that we live in. So, do you want to tell us or tell everybody who's listening what the premise of the book is?
Yeah. The Force Becomes Her is about, and it's set in contemporary Concord, Massachusetts, which you might know is like where Walden Woods and, the Emerson Thoreau, the Alcotts were. And it's about an old growth forest that was clear cut to make way for an eco-friendly housing development, which is kind of ironic. But the story is about these three women who live on or near this new housing development, and for different reasons related to things that are going on in their own life find themselves being drawn to this one last tree that was not cut down and start to feel that they're almost being haunted by the forest. And whether it's a real haunting or whether it's a psychological twist, whether it's real or imagined, you have to read the book to find out. But it's really about our connections to the land, about what happens to individuals, to the land, and to a community when a forest disappears. And it's about our connections, not just to the land, but our connections to each other. And it's all kind of brought together by this one last tree that these three women are trying to save.
I want to ask. I've got to ask. How important is this stuff to your heart? And were you kind of raised like this? Like I was raised like this to appreciate everything that's around you, whether it's a bug or a weed. They all have their purpose here. So, kind of, how important is that to you?
Very. So it's actually a really personal story to me. I grew up surrounded by woods, and when I was a kid, I was one of those kids who was always playing in the woods, like always climbing trees, building forts, and running around with walkie-talkies with my friends in the woods. And when I was in my early teens, the forest behind my house, part of it was clear cut. And there was an area in that forest that I had like, my special place, the place I'd go back and read and, on really bad days when I was 13, go cry or vent. And at that place, that tree, that was my tree, was torn down. And that was really traumatic for me at the time and left kind of a scar that I think has been kind of sitting on my heart for a long time. And so I gave that wound to Polly, who's a 13-year-old character in my book, that she is grieving the loss of the forest that had been in her backyard, and it was a really special place for her emotionally. So, yeah, there's a lot of me in these characters, particularly Polly. So I'm and I also made her a little braver, a little more resourceful and bolder than I was at her age, and that was fun and maybe a little therapeutic and cathartic for me to kind of rewrite my own story.
When you were writing, we have three different point of views in the book. What challenges did you face with the three specific point of views?
Yeah, so I mentioned that there's a lot of me in Polly. The secret is that all three of these women are versions of me at different ages in my life, where I was in my 30s and I'm in my mid 50s now. So there's Hazel is in her 30s. She's a point of view character, and Stella is in her mid 50s, like I am now. And I don't know about you guys, but I was a very different person when I was 13, when I was in my 30s, and where I am now. I will be a very different person if you catch me in 10 years. So, writing this story, I was kind of re-entering the brain of my former selves. And I had a really easy time with Stella because I am in my mid 50s and I think in similar ways as Stella in some ways. She's not exactly me. There's just elements of her that are me. And then Polly, at 13, I had a very easy time slipping into the skin of a 13-year-old. I had a very hard time accessing Hazel, who's in her 30s. And I did a lot of like soul searching. It's like, why am I having trouble finding my own feelings when I was in my 30s. And I think it's because I don't think I knew who I was in my 30s. I think I have four children and I was in the thick of it when I was in my 30s. I had just this whole slew of kids around and I was, working part of the time and I had two dogs and everything. I was just barely, keeping everybody alive. I don't think I knew who I was in my 30s. And I also moved into a housing development that had been clear cut on a piece of land that had been clear cut when I was in my 30s. So I took all these different parts. And so as I was writing them, I was digging deep into my own, not necessarily history, what happened to me, but my emotional history. And so once I found Hazel's voice, it was pretty easy for me to switch back and forth between them because they were all already there. Like all three of those voices were already inside of me. I've never written like that before. So this was actually a really fun exploration because there's things about yourself you don't necessarily like, things choices you've made in your past or attitudes or behaviors. So I had to kind of explore some of that too. And it was a very emotional process writing this book.
So my question is kind of a little because you have a little magic too in this from an author's perspective. So I'm a lean all the way in reader, and what you put on the page, I am there for it 100%. Like, so it's fun for me to let the author take me on the journey. Do you like being able to dip, like to not have to stay in strict thriller, strict horror, strict science fiction? So you got to blend it all up. How was that, and was it fun?
It was very fun. So when I wrote the proposal for this book and the first chapters and sent it to my agent, I was really nervous because my first book, which was called Waiting for the Night Song, it was contemporary, pretty straight up. My second book was set in a little bit in the near future. It's called The Last Beekeeper, and it's a little bit dystopian. It's about what happens to the world if we lose our pollinator. So I had to kind of imagine this dystopian future. So there's a little speculative there, but it was no magic. So this book was the first time I'd done anything, like had any kind of magical elements. And it was really fun for me. But so when I handed it off to my editor, I was afraid she was going to be like, okay, you're going too far. First you send me contemporary, then you send me a dystopian. Now you're sending me magical realism. I was afraid she was going to tell me to get in a lane. And she did not. She's like, if you're, her words to me were, is if it's going to get weird. And she thought I was kind of holding back on some of the elements in the early pages. And she's like, if you're going to go there, just let it go, which was really liberating for me. And I appreciate that about my editor a lot, that she doesn't put guardrails on the creativity and the stories that I write.
There's a little bit of echo horror too in a couple of one aspect of the story. Where did you get that thought from?
Yeah, so I was thinking a lot. I don't know if you've read Mexican Gothic, which is also kind of like this eco horror
Mhm.
novel, and some of the vibes from that about the interface between human beings and the natural world and places where they cross over and intersect, and some horror kind of scary vibes. I wouldn't call this book horror, but
No,
I like
no.
the term like eco horror light. It has
Yeah,
some elements of horror, but it doesn't go there.
yeah.
But when I was writing it, I was thinking of books like Mexican Gothic because it does take this the ecology and our environment and blend it with magical realism and some elements of my own eco anxieties, like climate anxieties and things concerns about habitat destruction and deforestation. And so I kind of took my own fears and animated them with a little bit of magic,
Mhm.
which again, this was maybe the most fun I've had writing, that it was exciting to just let it go where I wanted it to go. And I didn't have an outcome in mind. The ending was a surprise to me when I got there. And so I was kind of along for the ride too.
The last beekeeper had a little bit of the pollinators and losing that part of our ecology and these sorts of things. Do you hope that books like this will cause conversations about what is happening to our climate where we're at right now?
I
Have you
do. I
about
really, I really do. And when I first wrote when I wrote my first novel, I didn't even know there was a term called climate fiction. I just wrote a book that was the story that was on my heart that I wanted to tell. And so then someone said, "Oh, this is climate fiction," and I was like, "Well, okay, sure." But I wasn't writing it for to deliver a message or to reach certain people. I was just telling a story because I think story is always first. It's always about the characters and the plot and the emotional truths in a story. But these are just the stories that, matter to me. I used the term climate anxiety a minute ago. I think all of my books are a manifestation of a specific climate anxiety that I have. Whether it's about the first one was about rising temperatures and invasive species, and it was about, loss of pollinators. This one's about deforestation. I'm just finished a draft of my fourth book, which is coming out in 2028, and that one deals with foods that are going extinct, that we're going to lose, like iconic cultural foods that we're going to be losing before the end of the century. And so they're all um, things that are on my heart, but I didn't write them for a purpose, but I do hope that they spark conversations, and I've seen it happen because when I visit book clubs a lot. I do a lot of Zoom clubs. If any of your listeners are ever interested, reach out to me on social media. I love to Zoom into book clubs. And I've had people question me or challenge me on some of the elements of climate science, or just science in general that are in my books, and push back and say, well, maybe not everybody thinks the same way about climate change. And it gives me the opportunity to have a conversation with people who don't necessarily agree with me in a safe place. And they might be conversations some of these readers aren't having in other places. I think there are people who are going to show up for every documentary and are going to read every, 10,000 word article in the New York Times about climate change. And then there's the people who aren't. But this is kind of like a Trojan horse way of writing a good story with good characters and a compelling plot, and then having something that maybe they walk away with, and have conversations with, or think about it. And, my goal is never to go and preach to somebody. It's just to tell a story. But if that story makes someone care about something or think about something in a different way, then I did a good job.
Without giving away too much of the plot, can you talk about the old tree and um, where the idea from for the old tree came from?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of, I don't know what the right term is, best friend trees in my life, different points in my life when I was a little kid. I lived in Germany when I was young, and we had this tree in our front yard that I used to climb really high and read when I was a very precocious young reader. So I was at like 5 years old, and I would take Little House on the Prairie books up in a tree and read. And I saw a picture of it just in the past couple years. My father found a picture of me. The tree was like 5 feet tall. I was
Mhm.
literally like, I was not high up in a tree. My memory, I was. But I've always had trees that were like kind of touch points in my life. When I was, I mentioned that the trees that were cut down when I was a teenager, there was one tree in particular that had a vine that hung down from it in this like a U-shaped loop, that it was a perfect swing. And I could sit on that swing and I could swing out over on this creek in the woods. And I used to go back there and sit on that tree and read on a bad day, go back and cry or just think, and it was a tree that was really important to me. I used to call it the vine tree. And as an adult, I've had certain trees in my yard. We had this Japanese maple in the yard where I raised my kids. That was a really special tree. My kids used to sit underneath of it like a little fort. And so I was kind of drawing on these relationships with trees that I've had my whole life and how important they've been to me. They were kind of like friends to me. And there's the little girl or the teenager Polly, she has this habit of pressing her cheek up against the bark of trees. And she does this with the old oak tree, and she'll press her cheek to the tree long enough to imprint the bark on her cheek. Um, and I can remember the texture of all of my trees. I talk about these friends, the trees that I had, like the tree bark, the texture of them was kind of imprinted on me, not in a physical way, but I can remember what they felt like. So I was trying to, draw on those feelings I had, those relationships I've had with trees over my life, and I kind of mashed them all up into this really old, wise oak tree that kind of embodies, um, the sentience of a forest that disappeared.
Do you have a copy of is it Shel Silverstein's book, The Tree? Is that what it was?
Oh, the Giving Tree. Yeah.
Giving. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually have a couple copies of that. I have read that to all my kids. Yeah.
I had a friend send me a picture of it the other day, and she said, "This still makes you cry." And I said, "Yes, it does.
It
I mean, it's
does.
so real."
Yeah. It's just the love and yeah.
So Stella Court, I'm 50. So Stella just kind of hit just exactly perfect for me. And I don't, as a reader, I don't see a lot of fiction in this age. So like I feel like everything that I'm reading, everybody's in their 30s.
Right.
I'm not finding anything. So did you like being able to put a character, and how important was that to put somebody, in there that is not common in fiction?
Yeah. Yes, I loved writing Stella for those reasons. I loved writing her with, her all her chin hairs and her, you know, gaining some menopause weight and, kind of entering that I don't give a crap what people think anymore phase of life, which is an awesome place to be. And I really like this idea of just Stella just not caring. Of just being able to just like, this is the body that I am in, and this is where I am, and I'm going to go in the bathroom and have a hot flash and I'll be right back. And she just kind of like owns this part of her life and is completely unapologetic. There's one line in there that Polly observes that she wants to be like Stella when she grows up because Stella, if she has a wedgie, she just picks it. And that she just has this attitude of like, you know what? Here I am. And I really enjoyed writing that because she has, stuff she's dealing with. She's not in a very financially secure place in her life. But in terms of who she is, like in her body, in her life, and the things she believes in, I really loved that kind of the badassery, if that's a word, that Stella really just kind of owns. I loved writing that because, yeah, I think when we enter this part of life, you can either become invisible or you can become a badass, and you can choose. So I'm going with badass.
Yeah. For the record, on my 50th birthday, I parked on the sidewalk in front of the courthouse just to see what would happen.
I love
Just
that.
pulled the front two tires up there and I thought, let's see what happens. Nothing happened, but
Nope.
I thought I would test it out. But
I love that.
I mean, you're exactly right. The way that Stella was. I mean, there is something about turning 50 that I'm happy to be here right now.
Yeah, me too, 100%. I'm 56 and I've never been more me than I am
Yeah.
right now.
The young girl, I can't think of her name.
Polly,
Polly.
Polly.
Okay, now this was with her. Part of her story is a coming of age type, and she also befriends a trans girl. How important was that for you to include that into your book?
Yeah, so Cass is a young trans girl who's a couple years older than Polly, and Polly's a little bit of a loner, so she doesn't have a whole lot of friends. And she and Cass connect over their passion for conservation, for saving things. Cass is passionate about studying mushrooms, and Polly loves trees, and mushrooms and trees need each other. Just like mushrooms, underground fungal networks feed trees, and trees feed the all the networks of the fungi and all the fibers underground. And so they find each other, and Polly doesn't have a mother. She doesn't have like this figure in her life. And Cass actually is helping her kind of navigate things like how to do makeup or how to avoid doing makeup. Because and she becomes a kind of a guidepost for Polly and a friend who listens to her. They have something in common. And when I wrote Cass, the reason a part of the reason I wanted to include her is this book has three point of view characters who are women at different phases of life. There's someone in, going through puberty, someone in her for lack of, I don't know what the correct term is, but fertility years, and then someone going through menopause. And they're all kind of undergoing a hormonal storm in their life. And Cass is another way to be a woman in the world. And I didn't want to present these three women and present it as these are the three ways to be a woman. These are the three versions of womanhood, because I think that Cass helps Polly through this kind of complicated part of her life. And she was also, I had a neighbor growing up who was the same age as my son, and they were friends growing up who came out as a trans girl in high school and was really helpful to me in writing this character. I hired her as a consultant, and she read the manuscript. We had some Zoom calls, and this was during the pandemic, and she was giving me tips on, some like dialogue things or just ways to nuance the character a little bit to get it right because I thought this is really a story about transforming within our bodies in a lot of ways. It's about the different transfigurations women go through inside their own bodies through the whole course of a life. And so it felt really natural to me to include Cass in this story.
Yeah, I love I think I've got it right. She says she makes the comment, I was a girl before no everyone else knew I was a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I really did enjoy that
Yeah,
that
because
part.
Polly, when Polly first meets her, Polly, kind of just innocent ignorance says you didn't used to be a girl,
Yeah,
and Cass is like, oh no, honey, I was always a girl, just everybody else didn't realize it yet,
yeah,
and that's all it took to do it. There was no need for a big conversation. Paula was like, okay, cool. And then they were just friends after that.
that's
Her
boom.
her transness is, or there's no, it's not a trauma story. It's a story about two young girls finding each other over a
Mhm.
common interest and becoming friends, and they both really need each other
Yeah.
in as friends. And so yeah, I think that she like lays it out. That's who I am. And Polly's like, okay, all right, cool.
Ambiguous endings and ambiguous moments. And I think this book has this is why this would make a great book club book, because it does have both of those and every reader can take away something different. From an author's perspective, how fun is it, or even maybe frustrating, to see the different perspectives come back or the different reviews come back? Because I can guarantee you one thing, I read this the second time, I'm gonna come back with something different.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love it. I love it when somebody sees something in my book that I didn't even know, that I didn't intend, because I firmly believe once I write a book and send it out into the world, it's not mine anymore. It belongs to the person reading it, and every single person who reads it with a different life experience.
Mhm.
And so they're going to see things a little bit differently. So I don't ever want to argue with somebody and be like, "Oh, no, no, that's not if that's what you saw in it for in your version of it,
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a factual error, like you misread something, I might tell you. But if you took something else out of it, that's awesome. Um, I'm not going to talk specifically about the ending because it's a little twisty.
Mhm.
But there's something when I gave this book to my agent and to my editor, they saw two different things in the same ending of the book,
Mhm.
and they're both right, and they're both conflicting with each other. I'm not going to try to explain what it is.
Yeah.
But there's something, a viewpoint that changes, and they're both right, and I want to leave room for readers to see it in both ways.
Your process, do you plot everything out or you pantser? How do you do it? Because from what I'm gathering, it takes you a while to get a book finished.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've gotten better though. My first book took 13 years, but that's when I had all these little kids running around the house. But so it took me about 2 years to write this book.
Okay.
I did plot this book out. I did not plot my first book out, and it was just a sloppy old mess, the first draft of it, because I didn't know what I was doing. So the second, third, and the fourth one that I just finished, I have plotted them out quite meticulously. I always know where I'm going in the end, but I don't know how it's going to play out. I always kind of know the vibe I'm going for and maybe the space in the room and who's going to be there, but I don't quite know exactly what's going to happen. Um, and so I plot everything out quite in a lot of detail, but I leave myself a lot of room to change. If I get to a plot point and I'm like, I don't think they would do that, or that doesn't feel right, I will change it. But I do know where I'm going, and I plot things out on big charts, big paper, like color. I make graphs and different
Mhm.
color codes for different characters, and I have them on my wall, and that I look at them, because what it does is it allows me to visually see the scope of my whole book, and to see where like one character's arc might be getting really intense, and another one's it's kind of a little quieter, and I can see the way the tension is intersecting between different characters, the way relationships might be rising and falling in tension through the course of the book. So yeah, I'm a pretty meticulous plotter, but always with a little asterisk that I give myself plenty of room to change
Yeah.
if I need to.
Climate fiction, especially what I read, and I do read a lot of nonfiction stuff. So it seems like it
Mhm.
ends in catastrophe more than it ends in something good. But this novel leaves room for hope and restoration. So how important was it, and how hard was it to balance an important message and leave hope?
So I'm a big believer in hope, and I don't think that has to be a Pollyanna kind of attitude, because I don't, when I say hope, I don't mean I think we're going to go back to the way things were pre-industrial revolution and carbon levels are going to go down. And, that's not hope. Hope to me is not being paralyzed by grief. And because I think if you're paralyzed by grief or anger or fear when it comes to climate change and our future, you stop fighting for anything good. You stop trying to protect things. You stop trying to make things better. You could grieve all the things we're losing, because we're losing a lot. Every day we're losing things. Or you could love the things that are left. Like if we're losing, if I've used this example a lot because I like it, but it's a metaphor I lean into. But if you have a hummingbird feeder and you love hummingbirds and you put it out every single year, and usually have about 20 hummingbirds every year that come back, and you put it out and only five come back one year. You could either be really mad at all the reasons that the hummingbirds might not like this habitat anymore. You could be, you could grieve. You could just be so sad. You could give up and be like, I'm not even hanging this thing anymore. Or you could love the heck out of those five hummingbirds that are left.
Mhm.
And that's hope. Because if we give up on loving what's left, like there isn't hope for the future. And I think hope could also it could look really small. Hope could look like saving one tree. Hope could look like saving one forest, saving one person. Hope doesn't have to be fixing everything. Hope could look like adapting in the future. Hope doesn't have to mean fixing what's wrong. Maybe it's about preventing more damage or learning how to adapt and learning how to be passionate about what's still here because it's so easy to just get paralyzed by grief and anger. So when I write, that's kind of the perspective I come from. Like I try to be really realistic about what's happening and not pretend it's not, but give one small window of hope, one tree, one girl, one species, one thing you can like attach your hope to.
Have you ever had a story or not a story, a character or maybe an arc in one of your books that you had to delete?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, in the Last Beekeeper, which was my second novel,
Mhm.
it's like as I told you, it's a little bit dystopian. It's set in the very near future, and it's about a world where the pollinators died off, and it sets, if we lost all of our pollinators, we would lose one third of the food on Earth. And if you think about how much inequality we already have, think about who's going to get the food. Is
Yeah.
it going to what's it going to do to big agriculture, food security, economics, interglobal politics? Um, so I kind of went there and I went way too far. I had this whole storyline of how I created this whole other shadow economy in the United States that had a separate currency and how the
Oh,
two
wow.
currencies interacted with the dollar. And my editor was like, whoa, 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 whoa. We just need to know that it messed up the economy. And I was like so proud of this economy I had built. I had a different currency with exchange rates falling in one, but not the other currency. And I was really impressed with myself. And she was like, no, I don't think so. So I had to cut the whole thing out. Um, and it was the right call. It was, but I was really sad to let go of it because I thought I was very clever, but it wasn't meant to be.
Is there something about the Forest Becomes Her that nobody's asked yet that you're just like, oh, I really need this message to get out?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll tell you, I can't think of a specific question, but I'll tell you, not a lot of people read it yet. You got an early copy, so I haven't had a ton of questions because it doesn't come out. I don't know when this podcast will air. It comes out on July 14th, but so it isn't out yet. But there is something that I can leave an Easter egg for your listeners to look for, which, you can, next time I talk to any of you, you can ask me about it. But there is a couple of charm bracelets in the book that have some special meaning to me.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I planted those as Easter eggs for people in my life to find. And I do that in all of my books.
Ah,
In my second book, in the Last Beekeeper, there was a subplot where characters were trading books, like going to a used bookstore and like swapping books and recommending books to each other. And they were all made up titles. They weren't real books. And my editor was like, you can use real book titles. You don't have to make up books. And I was like, no, no, no. And it was all of the books titles were anagrams of my children's names. Like
oh.
I rearranged the letters of my kids' names, and those were the titles of the books. And my kids' names make fabulous anagrams, and so it made some really fun book titles. So I do that in all of my books, and I've had a couple people, ask me about it, but there isn't any. I'm sure there are questions that I haven't been asked yet, but I don't know what they are yet.
What is the main takeaway that you want people to get from your book?
I think about to be aware of our connection to the land we live on. We walk on it, we drive by it, we park in a parking lot next to a tree. But I think it's becomes almost like white noise to us that we don't see the things around us. But what if they were gone? Like imagine if they were gone. I just did a writing workshop at the Walden Woods Young Writers Workshop, which was teenagers writing about nature, and I had them all like imagine a place in nature that they really love. Like whether it's something from childhood, their grandmother's garden, or just like a tree they can see out their window, or just like imagine what it feels like, and then imagine if it was gone.
Yeah.
Like, how would you feel if that thing no longer existed? And it could just be something really small. It could be just a tree out your window, or um, and to just be more conscious of our connections to the land and how, you don't they always say, you don't you miss something until it's gone. But try loving it while it's still here and just be more aware of the small things in your life. It doesn't have to be, Mount Everest or Yosemite. It can just be your backyard or, something out your window.
We had a catawba tree in our backyard that my papa planted when my dad was little. And so we would get these catawba worms off of it to fish with. And a tornado took the tree,
Oh,
Mm.
and it actually happened on my birthday. And I had the girls were little, and anyway, we ended up taking slices of the tree that ended up like a shape of a heart,
oh
and
my
we all
gosh.
have those. They're in every house now from that tree. Oh, it still breaks my heart. I mean, I can't handle that. It is a
I
big
hate
deal.
that you lost the tree, but I love that you were able to do that. That is amazing. My sister is a teacher, a third grade teacher, and there was a tree outside her classroom that she loved, and they had to cut the tree down this past year for it had to do I don't know if it was dying or it was a risk of falling. I don't know what it was, but I remember her calling me like devastated that they took the tree down, and she didn't know it was coming down because she wanted to ask for a piece of it, and it was too late. Like
Oh.
she didn't know it was coming down. So I love that you and your family members all have a piece of it.
I've got a magnolia in my front yard that my great grandmother, my mother's grandmother, and my mother planted before I was even born. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
so anyway, I don't know if you know anything about a magnolia, but they are troublesome. They lose their leaves when everything else is greening up. Okay, so in the spring is when they lose their leaves, and there'll be I might cuss that tree, but I'm not ever going to do anything to that tree. And my uncle who lives next door in my grandmother's house, he's like, you just cut that thing down. I was like, I'm not cutting down my mama's tree.
No,
My
you can't.
mother,
That's bad
you
karma.
know, I mean, my nephew broke his arm climbing it. I'm not going to do anything to that tree, but it is everybody has some kind of connection to something in their life to a piece of nature.
Yep. Yeah, and so I just like invite people to think of that one thing, that one place
Mhm.
or your that's just special, and then try to let yourself imagine it being taken from
Oh.
you or gone or destroyed, and just imagine that grief and act on it now. Don't wait till it happens, to care about what's around you. Don't wait till it's gone.
Before we go and say goodbye, can you tell us, will you be on a book tour this with this book?
I will, yes.
Okay.
I'm going to be going through, and if you go to my website, it's juliecarrickdalton.com.
Mhm.
I have my tour schedule, and it's also on my Instagram page at Julie C Dalton. You can see a graphic that has all the tour sets. I'm going to be going to in a couple places in New Hampshire, to Severna Park, Maryland, to Boston,
Mhm.
to Park City, Utah, Atlanta and Vermont. And then I'll be doing some more in New Hampshire and Massachusetts at the end of the tour. And then in the fall, I'm going to be taking a break in August to be with my family in the summer. And then on September and October, I have a bunch of other cities and I'm still adding things. So
Okay.
if anybody has an idea for me or wants me to come, give me a shout out. I'm still adding to the book tour in the fall.
Parnassus in Nashville.
I have not been to that one, but I love seeing Ann
It's
Patchett's
just
little video
it,
clips online. She's
yeah.
amazing.
It's a
That is a book a bookshop I would like to visit one day.
it's really really neat. I don't know if Teresa, have you ever been to Parnassus? It's an independent bookstore, but it's very modern. It's just I don't know, it's really neat. I've been there a few times. Of course, I'm 2 hours from Nashville, but everybody raves about Ann's bookshop.
I've
Um,
heard that too. Well, if I ever
is
end up there, I'll give you a shout out, let you know.
all right. Signed books, will you have a local place where people can order signed books? Do you have anything lined up for that yet?
Yes, so I am working on that, and I don't want to say it online in case it changes, but
I
I am
got you.
working with one of my local
Okay.
bookstores right now
All right.
to have that arranged. So do you put up show notes, and maybe by the time this goes live, I might have an answer for you, and you could
Let's
put it in the show
see.
notes.
Book clubs, you said you zoom into book clubs at
I
request.
do.
Okay.
I do. I love doing book clubs. So
Okay.
folks can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, or through my website if they're interested. Just I would say if you use my website portal, put in the contact book club invitation, I get a lot of really weird invites through my contact page.
I can
A
imagine.
little- so yeah, so just in the subject heading, just put book club invitation, and I will be sure to get back to you. I love visiting book clubs.
do you have anything that we did not ask that you want to talk about?
I'll tell you just a tiny little teaser about the fourth book. I just finished it 3 days ago.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if this will be the real title, but I'm calling it Children of the Flood, and it's set in Alaska
Oh,
in the future, and it involves and further into the future. So it's kind of a climate altered Alaska, and it deals with foods that we're losing and that are going extinct. It's a book about memory, what we hold on to and what we let go of. And so I'm just getting started on that journey. It's gonna be a lot of editing ahead, but I'm just feeling really excited right now about having a first draft of it.
awesome. Sounds great. Teresa, anything else for you? You good?
No, I just thank you so much. Just
Yeah.
it's really fun to read a book like this. For me, it is, and
I bet.
I will like recycle. I only run my dishwasher in the evenings in the summer. I turn the light. Like I will try and make as much of a difference as I can, even those tiny little pieces. Um, it would be nice if everybody else did, but
Yeah.
like I can't buy a car unless I'm getting 35 miles to the gallon. Like I've got like,
You know,
oh,
and
it stresses me out.
And I really think that like some people are called to like different things. Like some people it's like I'm going to be vegan, and some people it's like I'm going to get an electric car. And I think everybody I always feel like just listen to whatever that voice is like telling you to do, because nobody can do all of it. That's I think
Yeah.
people get like guilt, like, oh, but I'm doing all these things, but I eat meat, or I do all these things, but whatever the thing they feel guilty about, like just do the thing you can do really well, and give up on the guilt, and just we all have something's calling us.
Yeah.
I'm in Tennessee. She's in Kentucky. But last night, about 9 o'clock, we had a major blackout. It'll probably be on the national news because there was over 1 million people affected without electricity from the
Oof.
Mississippi River to the Tennessee River last night. One of the main lines of TVA went out, and you just don't realize how dark it is because we live in the boondocks. You don't realize
Yeah.
how dark it is until you have zero light. I mean,
Wow.
absolutely nothing. And we were laying in the bed last night. It was so quiet, I can't go to sleep. It's just too quiet. The
Yeah.
TV's not buzzing, the fan's not going. Julie Dalton's book, The Forest Becomes Her, is available July the 14th from St. Martin's Press. Thank you to Megan Beatty Communications for arranging this conversation. Check this book out. You all will not be disappointed. Thank you, and y'all have a good day.